For many firms, compliance has evolved from an isolated business prevention unit to a commercially focused business partner. Good governance can make businesses more competitive and even prevent crime. Vanessa Cuddiford went to find out why good compliance equals good business.
The 2008 financial crisis was the worst since the Great Depression. What began as a crisis in the US subprime mortgage market was compounded by the collapse of Lehman Brothers. Later, internal documents would reveal a culture with no accountability for failure. The company had taken excessive risks, and it wasn't alone. Nick Elliott reported on the crisis as it unfolded.
The financial crisis was a catalyst for changing the way that financial institutions look at risk. Whereas in the past they've mostly focused on credit and market risk, it woke them up to the fact that regulatory risk was a massive risk that had to be dealt with. Another major area of focus and a big change in the approach to regulation since the crisis has been the focus on what they're calling culture. Compliance is about obeying the rules and staying within the rules. Culture is about the approach you take to doing business. And the financial industry has really moved closer in line with general thinking that it's fine to come up with sets of rules that people have to obey, but it's actually a much more powerful discipline on business if you can have your employees understand the values and standards that you have at that company and keep them within those standards.
Maintaining standards makes business sense, preventing the fines that many banks faced following the crisis. But it also has wider societal benefits.
Modern compliance isn't about ticking boxes or inhibiting business. It's an enabler, protecting society from organised crime, owned by the front line.
Geraldine Lawler knows that better than most. She's Global Head of Financial Crime at Barclays.
We've been working very actively with government and law enforcement at the moment in trying to understand what are the priority threats for UK PLC. And as part of that, we've come up with what we see as the 5 key threats for the UK. So that's terrorism, human trafficking, how we identify corruption and drive corruption out of particularly the area of real estate, the trade-based money laundering, and also how we identify and mitigate the threat of money laundering through markets. We are starting to identify and work through expert groups in coming up with typologies as to how we would identify that risk, and then using data analytics we're able to surface that risk within our book and then provide intelligence to law enforcement.
Criminals who once remained hidden can now be identified as standing out from the crowd through the kinds of transactions they make.
It's fascinating. You know, you will talk to a lot of people in the modern compliance industry and they're very passionate about what they do. It's rare to say that there are, I guess, historically jobs, say, in a large financial institution where you could look yourself in the mirror and say, you know, I am making a real difference. I am making positive decisions and helping society as well as my firm, as well as protecting customers. And I think this win-win approach is something that's gone beyond just a narrow compliance function in banks and other firms, where they have actually realised, you know, what the compliance function are promoting actually makes good commercial sense for sustainable businesses as a whole in the long term. And you know what? That's a really brilliant change, but we've got a long way to go yet in making sure that mindset is consistent all around the world.
That journey towards raising global standards means new laws keep coming into place and regulators keep making new demands. Change is the only constant, which means professional compliance training is key.
There's an absolute labyrinth out there of complexity around the sheer volume and pace of legal and regulatory changes, and all of this is tied up with geopolitical events. So if you're talking about something like financial sanctions, you know, virtually a day doesn't go by where we don't see dramatic changes coming out of the US or United Nations. And these changes on a global level very much have a micro level impact on firms. So I think the requirement is really much that we have practitioners who are cutting edge and up to date with not just where regulation is today, but where it's going in the future.
RegTech, FinTech and AI will all play a part in that future. But in the rapidly changing field of compliance, experienced, trusted advisors will always be needed. the benefits of the expert guidance they give every day in countless offices reach beyond international boundaries to make the whole world a safer place.